Tennessee This Week from WATE 6 on your side starts now.
Hello and welcome to Tennessee This Week. I'm Don Hudson. Before we get started on talking about the topics here in our state, let's reintroduce our panel of pundits. Courtney Piper, our political contributor, Craig Griffith, healthcare analyst, and Michael Covington, our industrial consultant. There's a lot to talk about, that's for sure, but let's just start with after voting to approve the Advanced Knox plan, or voting to not approve it, I should say, on a 3-2 vote, the Farragut Board of Mayor and Aldermen voted a few days ago to reconsider the plan. It was a heated meeting. They're going to have another meeting on April 11th. That vote, by the way, was 3-1 because somebody walked out of the room during the whole thing. So what will Farragut eventually do? How will they revote? Where is Advanced Knox headed? What's next in this whole thing? Courtney, we're going to start with you. How's that?
The political drama surrounding this is just fantastic. It is just fantastic. So here's what we know. Before that original vote took place, we think that Advanced Knox and our Knox County mayor thought it was going to pass that Farragut vote, and it did not.
Right.
And the discussions that they had and the debate that they had during it, it was just, for political junkies, this is just, it doesn't get any better than this. But, I think it was really fascinating because during those discussions, when the Farragut Board of Aldermen had that first vote, there were sort of two camps of people. There were people who were saying, we don't like what's happening now, so we're going to vote against this plan. And then you had the vice mayor saying, well, if you don't like what's happening now, that's happening under the current growth plan, so you should vote for this new growth plan. You should vote for Advanced Knox. And the fact that it failed, I think, surprised everybody. And, to Mayor Jacobs' credit, he was going to look at state level legal action. And all of a sudden, the Farragut Board of Aldermen, once faced with that and once faced with having to publicly explain why they voted against it, all of a sudden we're like, never mind, we'll revote again. I don't know if something like this has ever happened in the history of Knox County, where our county mayor or another political entity within Knox County was able to exert this kind of pressure on the town of Farragut. And for a political junkie, it's just absolutely fascinating.
Michael or Craig, do you see it that way or see it a little differently?
Well, I go back to the last growth plan, which the town of Farragut torpedoed as well. So what I can't figure out is why there wasn't more emphasis on reaching out to the Board of Aldermen to find out where they were on this plan. Do they have reservations about it? After all, they killed the process several years ago, so there was, certainly within the realm possibility that they would do it again. And it seems to me that the things that were discussed after the vote, about going to the state to declare an impasse, about, perhaps not prioritizing in the county budget Farragut projects that got the interest of the Board of Aldermen. It kind of reminded me of the late Governor Ned Ray McWhorter. There's a legend that Ned Ray McWhorter kept a small Caterpillar bulldozer in his desk drawer. And when he was talking to legislators who he didn't see eye to eye with, the legend is that Ned Ray would open up his drawer, pull out the bulldozer and say, if you ever want to see a yellow bulldozer in your district again, paid for by state funds, you'll see it my way. So he had a way of talking to legislators that convinced him of the right thing to do. So this reminds me of Ned Ray McWhorter when Mayor Jacobs decided maybe some reprioritization of the projects was in order. And we'll see. I think the vote will probably be favorable now, and they'll move ahead with Advanced Knox.
And I'm completely joking here when I say this. Maybe the county mayor pulls out one of those cane dolls. Maybe that's what he does.
Yeah, maybe a bobblehead will work.
Anyway, Michael.
Well, back to Courtney's point, the mayor and other members of that Advanced Knox group, consortium, if you want to call it that, $1.2 million was spent. A couple of years went into this, and folks who know property and development were very involved, and all of the principals who voted were at the table. And my understanding is that everybody thought that it was going to pass because the three people who voted against it were leaning toward voting for it. So I'm not really seeing that impetus at the point of voting. I'm not seeing the impetus. I'm not seeing the motivation. The only thing that I'm certain of is that time passed. There was a measure of time. The county mayor had an opportunity to contact the comptroller's office to set up an arbitration, which would have been binding. The only thing that we know that has happened is that 96 hours have gone by, and there's a scheduled vote for April 11th. And as Craig was saying, most likely it will pass. So the only thing that has really happened is feathers were ruffled and time has passed. The question that I have is why? Why did they vote against it when everybody believed that they would? This is ultimately going to pass. It's ultimately going to happen. So what was the purpose of voting against it? And that's yet to be explained.
I do remember us talking to community groups out there that, and I'm going to assume that some of them had their ear, that were really pushing against the growth or sprawl or traffic or safety. And that would be my guess, if that was the why they decided at the last minute just to vote that way.
Well, that appears to be the working theory. I forgot the woman's name who won the Republican primary and for that county commission district that would represent Farragut, but she was the one that was really vocal against a lot of the development going on in the town of Farragut, and also in that West Knoxville area. So the working theory is, by her winning that primary, she built up some momentum. She built up a constituency, and those folks got to some of the aldermen.
Well, and it doesn't really, it's great to have the process. It's great to spend $1.2 million, come up with a plan. A lot of people looked at it, but in the end, it's a political process, and you have to count your votes. Do you have 5 votes on city council? Do you have 3 votes at the Farragut Board of Aldermen? And that's the real test. And they had it on city council, but they didn't have it at Farragut. So, I sort of fault the political leadership to a degree of Knox County for thinking that the plan would carry the day, when it's always relationships. It's always that one-on-one discussion of the plan, which apparently has occurred after the negative vote with one Board of Aldermen member that's changing his vote. So,
but Craig, the rebound is beautiful. You couldn't have scripted a better rebound than this.
Well, they didn't have to go through it, is my point.
But then what fun would that be? What would we be talking about?
The legislature, of course.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, what is there any way that this doesn't go forward? And when I say this, like Advance Knox and the plan for property and land, or is there any way that they think about it even longer and they say, we're going to stay right where we are with this, and they have to.
Well, this is only one of 2 votes.
It's possible.
They have to come back, I guess, with the land use map now.
Right.
So there has to be votes on that as well, but that can't be passed until you vote the growth plan. So it's still up in doubt. You would think it would pass, but as we found out in Farragut, not always happens the way the script reads out.
Here's for all of you, just quickly respond. Do you think that Farragut votes differently this time, and that we move forward with Advance Knox? Yes.
Well, it took 4 people to vote to have the meeting. So I think that because you rescheduled the meeting, of course, I'm not an expert in Farragut politics, so that may be very naive of me.
Current events would indicate that yes, it would pass, but I mean, it's Farragut. I think it could also just equally fail again.
Yeah. Michael?
Well, if it doesn't pass, then Mayor Jacobs, he's going to exercise his option to bring in an arbitrator, and that arbitrator is going to make this decision for us.
All right, there you go. We're going to get into some other topics, but first we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with more Tennessee This Week. Welcome back to Tennessee This Week. The Tennessee Valley Authority retiring the Kingston fossil plant, replacing it with a state-of-the-art energy complex, and there's so much definition here. The complex will include natural gas, battery storage, solar generation, 100 or 1,500 megawatts, combined cycle, dual fuel, aero derivative, natural gas combustion turbines, 100 megawatt. It goes on with all these stuff. The bottom line is the coal-fired units at Kingston will be retired by the end of 2027. Center for Biological Diversity calls it a climate killing plan and, quote, beyond reckless. Others are glad to see something new at the Kingston plant area. Is this moving forward this way? Is it a done decision? Is it a good decision? Or are we still going to get a lot of tweaking? Michael?
I think it all sounds good. All of the things you just mentioned all sound good. We are going in that direction. We are going to have to modernize, and I like to think that Tennessee and East Tennessee in particular, we're at the forefront of that. So we have to do this. We have to modernize. I'm not sure what the climate or the environment. I don't know how that impacts the climate or the environment. So until they can come up with something that explains what their opposition is, I'd say ignore the environmentalists and move forward.
Craig, Courtney?
So, Don, this is what my firm sort of specializes in. We work a lot in the energy sphere, and the decision by TVA really represents a national movement away from coal. Coal is the dirtiest form of power or electricity. It's also increasingly expensive to operate a coal plant. And while natural gas is, yes, a fossil fuel, the amount of carbon emissions is far less than a coal plant. Now, the technology that TVA talked about putting in, those aeroderivatives, there's a lot of industry knowledge that said that is a better technology to sort of match the intermittency of solar, so that this plant you could literally turn on and turn off. There are other technologies that you can turn on and turn off faster to match that intermittency of solar. But by and large, this is moving in a more advanced direction, with there being battery storage and some solar on the site. Now, I think a lot of environmentalists and other industry leaders would argue, could TVA have put in a more flexible thermal power system, and that would have enabled more solar energy somewhere else on their system, maybe generated by a local power company? Who knows? This record of decision was issued. This is final. This is going to move forward. So, by and large, it does represent TVA's commitment to be a cleaner energy company of the future. And they might also be banking on some of the Inflation Reduction Act that might enable carbon capture technology to be put on this plant that would remove those additional carbon emissions. So we'll see. It's really an exciting time for TVA. The utility industry is just dramatically different than it was 3 to 5 years ago. So we'll see what other innovations continue to come out of TVA.
And Craig, some people, I should say, are, like I said, use the term climate killing and beyond reckless. Some wanted to do more studying about this whole thing. Should TVA just get on what they've decided to do and move forward, or should they do more studies?
Well, those plants are probably 80 years old. They were coming to the end of their natural lifetime of being able to power the Tennessee Valley. So something had to be done. And it was costly to retrofit them with carbon capturing systems. So I think TVA was forced with doing something. And the equation that they had to deal with, in my opinion, is they had to come up with a group of energy strategies that equaled about the same amount of output that the old coal-fired plants had. And in my reading on this, that they've very nearly matched that amount of energy production. So, I think it's they just couldn't have taken the plant offline and studied it for years, because the Tennessee Valley is growing. There was a need for that power. There's a thing called AI, which is coming out, which is requiring, megawatts of energy to power the server farms that are powering AI. So the future is more electricity, not less electricity, even though some people would like to reduce the demand side. The demand, unfortunately, is growing and not going down. The question is, how do you produce it? And I think TVA has struck a balance here on producing it in a number of different ways that reduce the carbon output and the carbon footprint of the agency in the valley.
And I would assume if you're making, you're trying to power more EVs, that's going to reduce, at least on one end, is going to reduce some of the pollution. At the same time, these plants have to be able to produce even more electricity, because if every year there's going to be more and more electric vehicles, we have to be ready for
Well,
it.
I think that's, you're going to bed and plugging your car in, just like you're
Yeah.
going to bed and plugging your phone in. And that's the time where it's the lowest demand for energy. So hopefully that will be produced when energy is offline, or is the demand is reduced, and you'll be powering your car at a low demand cycle.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about teachers and administrators maybe being allowed to carry guns at school, and another bill that's being looked at that would kind of change from handguns to possibly being able to open carry rifles. We'll get into both of those things when we come back on Tennessee This Week. Welcome back to Tennessee This Week. Senate Bill 1325, a bill to allow teachers and administrators to be armed, passed a key Senate Judiciary Committee. I'm going to put on here so that people who are watching, before they react, after they go through training, which the training is 40 hours of basic training in school policing, it's the same as what a school resource officer who carries a gun, they would have to go through. So they can't just willy-nilly come in with a gun. They've got to go through training and be okayed about it. Democrats don't like the idea. They don't think it's the answer to school violence. Some Republicans say it's another layer of protection for students. Curious about all your thoughts on the possibility of this. And we'll begin with Michael on this.
Wow, this is a very complex issue. Whenever you talk about guns in schools and teachers and students being protected by those guns, it opens up a whole lot of discussion. I was prepared to say, yes, arm every teacher that wants to go through training and be licensed to carry a weapon into a school to or for the purpose of defending the school and the young people and the staff in the school. I was all for that. Then you look at the possibility of a changing student environment, where especially with older kids, you're finding a lot of teachers are leaving schools now because students are so aggressive. Students are so violent. They assault teachers in many instances. And so in talking with people about the possibility of teachers carrying guns, and this has been a dialogue that's been going on for a little while, a lot of individuals feel as though there's another equation to be considered, and it's this: suppose a student has become violent and is assaulting a teacher or hurting a teacher, harming a teacher. You see videos of teachers and students fighting all the time. What happens when there's an armed teacher that sees his option as using deadly force against a student? So that, coupled with the fact that a lot of teachers would prefer to not carry a gun but shield students with their bodies, that's not going to work either. That teacher's just going to be shot, and then the students will be shot. So it's not as simple as teachers carrying guns solving the problem. I think that we need to consider all of the possibilities of what happens when teachers are trained to be armed in schools.
Just for the facts on this matter, 32 states already allow it. So then there's many of these have been doing it for years. And before I came out here, I tried to find incidents where something like that happened. I'm not saying they don't exist, but I couldn't find them, on the internet. I found like one time where a teacher accidentally fired their gun, but I'm not saying that it couldn't happen. Anyway, going back to the point, should they be moving forward on this? Is it another layer of protection, or is it just an accident waiting to happen, Courtney?
It's an accident waiting to happen. Anytime when you introduce a firearm in the classroom, you're also introducing the potential for a horrible accident to occur for some of the reasons that Michael just listed. If the training is the same as what a school resource officer would receive, why not just add more school resource officers into the school? The teacher's focus should be on the students, teaching the students, not making sure that they have a firearm securely stored in their classroom, yet easily accessible if an intruder were to bust through the door. That is just absurd. We ask way too much of our teachers already. Now we are going to add this option for them to have a firearm, a weapon in the classroom that could kill and seriously injure somebody else, and also ask them to keep their focus on their students. It's an accident waiting to happen. If the training is the same as a school resource officer, let's just put more school resource officers in the schools.
Greg?
I am not one that thinks that more guns equals safety. I'm not sure that any of the school shootings that we have witnessed, having the teachers armed would have changed the outcome. And I think that it's time we look at other safety measures for schools. And there's been times when there's been shootings occurring, when there's been resource officers involved, and they didn't stop the shooting either. So I'm not, it sounds good, but I don't think necessarily that adding weapons to a place that's been designated a safe place where you don't carry firearms. Some people say that those are just simply targets for the people that want to commit mass murder. And but I'm not sure that it, saying, oh, there's guns there, so I'm not going to go to schools anymore to shoot up people. So it's a much more difficult issue than just arming teachers. And I'm not sure that the majority of teachers want to do this either. I remember after 9/11, there was this movement to arm airline pilots, so that they would have some way to stop hijackings and things like that. And the airline pilots refused to do it. I mean, they thought that there was going to be more margin of error for accidents, for misfirings, for, a pilot getting mad at some other pilot because of what's going on in their personal life. And they wound up not doing it. They wound up putting better locks on the cockpit doors. So there may be lessons to learn there as well. So I don't think it's a good idea. I think that it's going to, as Courtney says, burden some teachers with more responsibilities than just teaching their students.
And it's just an antidote. When I was a teacher, as you all know, I used to be a police officer. And when I was substitute teaching, I did work at a school that had a sign that said our teachers and administrators are armed. And many did have them. You never saw them, but many who were there did have those, and there was never any incidents. But that, again, it's not a big study. It's just personal experience. All right. The other gun issue going
Well, if
forward,
a sign could stop violence, then let's just put up more signs.
well, no, I'm saying the sign was there, and then the people inside, of course, were armed.
Right.
So it's,
And of course, another issue with this is
Yeah.
that the bill doesn't allow parents to know if the teachers are armed. In
Right.
this period of I want to know what my
Yeah.
children are reading, what they're seeing, I think that safety, they should be willing to find and disclose which teachers have guns that are being carried. I think that's as important as the reading list.
All right. Tennessee law stipulates that you can openly carry a handgun in the state, but they may change that word from handgun to firearm, which then would allow a loaded long gun to be carried openly in Tennessee. This is getting the Speaker of the House, Cameron Sexton, just says other states have this open carry wide open. And in those states, we haven't really seen a problem, but I understand everyone's concern because it's something we've not seen here. Normally when people are carrying, you don't see it. They're concealing it. And this would be a bill that would allow you to open carry a rifle, which of course you can see. Is this idea going to pass? Good idea, bad idea? Anyone who wants to answer.
You know what? Other states expanded Medicaid so that their citizens could have access to health care, and we haven't.
Okay.
That first. That would affect quality of life.
Since we're down to 50 seconds, Michael.
So you're
go and
you're strolling through West Town Mall and a bunch of people come walking by you carrying, shotguns and long guns. What are you supposed to think? Are you going to be comfortable shopping there?
Michael, last word here on it.
I'm uncomfortable walking into a store and someone's carrying a double barrel shotgun. That's just over the top for me.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, open carrying long rifles versus handguns. There's probably people all around us that have guns. We just don't see it. In this case, you would definitely see it. especially if they were carrying it on their back.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
All right. I want to thank our pundits for being with us and taking on all these issues. We're running out of time, so that's going to wrap things up for Tennessee This Week. We hope to see you next week as well. Thanks for watching.
The views of guests on Tennessee This Week are their own and do not represent the views of WATE 6 on your side or Nexstar Broadcasting.